Shalom. The Torah portion this week is called Vayishlach, and it means "and he sent." And it starts with Genesis 32:4 to 36:43, and it ends with the whole book of Obadiah, which is only 21 verses. So, Genesis starts off with Jacob preparing to meet Esau, and ends with him wrestling with the divine being, which is what I'll be focusing on. In chapter 33, he finally meets with Esau, and it goes way better than he was thinking it would in chapter 32. In chapter 34, it tells us about Dinah being defiled by Shechem, who was a Hivite, and ends with Simeon and Levi killing every man in Shechem city as a response. In chapter 35, God tells Israel and his family to return to Bethel. After that, Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin, and we get an account of Israel's sons, and then another account of Isaac's death. And in chapter 36, we get an account of the Edomites, Seir's family, and the rulers of Edom. And finally, in Obadiah, we get a prediction of Edom being destroyed for their hostility against Judah and Jerusalem. So we go back to Genesis 32, and I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory on Jacob, even though everybody knows about him, considering he's the father of the Israelites. But most of his life, Jacob was a guy who deceived people and stole from them, trying to acquire blessings or a good life through his own strength by doing a couple bad things. But most of Jacob's story comes from his disbelief in God's ability and willingness to give him the blessing that he promised him before birth. Instead of trusting God, he schemes and tries to steal the blessing and abundance for himself. So we get to chapter 32, and Jacob prepares to meet Esau. He stays up all night scheming, sending his wives and his children ahead of him in reverse order of importance, and still relying on his own strengths. But God shows up at night when he's alone and starts to wrestle with him, and he ends up dislocating Jacob's hip. But even while hurt, Jacob holds on to God until sunrise, and when he's told to let go, he refuses until God blesses him. So God changes his name to Israel and blesses him, and he tells him the meaning of the name, which is, "You have struggled with God and with man and have prevailed." So it seems like God gives him props for his perseverance. But what's funny about all that is Jacob wrestled God for a blessing that God meant to give him all along, which is just a pretty good summary of his life. Not only is it a good summary of Jacob's life, but it's a good summary of most of our lives also. A lot of the time we want to rely on our own strengths and forget to trust God's plan and willingness to bless us. We wrestle with God a lot when he just wants us to trust him and rely on his plan, but instead we want certain things done in our own time. But God knows that about us, and he doesn't hold it against us. He will bless us just like he blessed Jacob, who wasn't necessarily a great person. We just have to hold on to him like Jacob did when he felt like he had no way out. We just have to turn to him, Yeshua. So with that being said, we should remember to trust in God's plan, to let him be a conduit of our blessings, even when things seem rough. Instead of trying to acquire blessings for ourselves, we should be a conduit of blessings for others and a conduit of love and peace, because that's what we're called to do, just like Israel was called to be a blessing to the nations. Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." So that's it.